What if the off-season is where wrestlers improve the most, but also where they are most likely to burn out? Because once the season ends, a lot of athletes feel the pressure to do more tournaments, more lifting, more practices, more everything. And sometimes that works until it doesn't. So, how do you get better in the off season without arriving to the next season exhausted, injured, and mentally done with the sport? Today, we are talking about what smart off season training really looks like, how to build skills, strength, confidence, and consistency without overdoing it. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Illinois Girls Wrestling Podcast, the show that strives to create a supportive community for Illinois girls wrestling through storytelling and expert insights so that athletes, coaches, and families feel connected and empowered. Can this podcast be helpful for boys? Absolutely. We share a lot of great wrestling information for everyone, but we also want to give girls and their families a space they can call their own. Today's topic is one that matters to almost every wrestler and parents: off-season training. Not just how to work hard, but how to work smart. And I'm excited to be joined by Liam Cummins, the girls wrestling head coach at Lane Tech, where the program recently captured their first state sectional title. Liam, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
We're now in off season, and this topic is one of those topics that athletes sort of kind of thinking on every level. How do we continue wrestling without burning out? And I think it's a good question for beginners, returning wrestlers, high school athletes that are looking for a bigger goal for next year, and honestly, even parents trying to figure out where they should go from here. So, so let's start with just a more or less generic framework. What is the off-season really for? When people hear off-season wrestling, I think a lot of them picture nonstop grinding. In your mind, what is the actual purpose of the off-season?
Well, it all depends on what level of wrestler you are. If you just finished your first season, it's a matter of continuing to develop fundamentals because those are always going to apply at the highest level. And if you're still a beginner, you don't want to be performing training that is maybe outside of your zone of proximal development. You don't want to be doing things that are going to frustrate you, but you do want to be challenged.
Okay, that's a really helpful way of framing it, because I think sometimes families just hear off season and they think it's either take a total break or just go all in and never stop training. And I think the smartest answers lay somewhere in between. When you look at a wrestler coming out of the season, what are the main buckets you are hoping they improve during the off season?
The off season is a really good time for strength training. I think you can focus on your lifting a little more because you're not going to be practicing every day. I think that would be the case for most kids. And then with freestyle and Greco, it's just a matter of really getting better at wrestling on your feet because that's the most important phase of the sport. And you're going to be able to really emphasize the fundamentals in that area in freestyle and Greco.
What do you feel like is the biggest difference between training in season and training in off season? This is what I saw. I saw the girls that do really well in season go into their first off season competition and realize that they're not good. Like they are suddenly not able to score. Why does a relatively decent in season wrestler feels maybe frustrated and not good enough in the off season?
It could just be a matter of not having the parterre skills, really. And then also, for example, like in the city, I could have a first-year wrestler and she's able to succeed and be better than her competition. But then when we go to like a developmental tournament or the freestyle state, everyone at these off-season competitions is really interested in getting better and probably a little more competitive than kids you may run into during the high school season.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And all of a sudden, you are competing against people that maybe this is their second off season.
Right, right.
And now let's talk a little bit about how can we do the off-season training without doing too much. I feel like that's the biggest question of this episode. How do wrestlers improve without burning out? Because I think a lot of wrestlers are afraid that if they don't stay busy every second, they are falling behind. What do you say to a wrestler that feels that pressure?
I think that impression probably falls on new kids, right? New wrestlers who see, really successful high school or collegiate athletes on social media, and they think that they have to emulate what those athletes do. But, you know, there's phases in the development, and if you're going into your first off season, like yes, you want to compete and apply the training you may be receiving in like a freestyle Greco club, but your bigger goal, if you're going into your first offseason, should be to improve for the next high school season.
If we are looking at the social media, and I think 99% of us are, this is what we see. It's very easy to fall under the impression that everyone is training all the time. What are some signs that an athlete's off-season plan is becoming too much?
I think if when they verbalize it is a good example. Like if you just ask a kid, hey, what's your plan for the season? And they tell you they're going to do 8 or 9 different things and it's only their second year wrestling, they might be taking on too much training, too much information where they could just be focusing on fundamentals and skills that they're already good at and just working on improving those with a club or a coach or a group that they're already familiar with.
Mm-hmm. And when we're talking about burning out, what does that actually look like in a wrestler?
I think burnout would display itself pretty well watching kids compete. If they're coming in developmentals and they're just kind of going through the motions with their matches and they think, oh, this is something I just have to do. And they're actually not as invested in the wrestling, that may be a sign that they're just wrestling all the time because they think it's what they're supposed to do. And they're not as focused on getting better and trying to apply technique.
I would like to talk a little bit about the difference between being tired and being burnout because those things are not the same thing. While sometimes athletes think that feeling exhausted all the time means they're working really hard, when really it may be a sign of a burnout.
When an athlete is not having fun in the sport, that is when I think that is the biggest sign of burnout because that is the point of the sport. And that's what good coaches promote is to, yes, you're going to train hard and you're going to compete and it's going to be exciting. It can be disappointing, but it should always be fun.
When it comes to parents of wrestlers that are listening right now, what are some of the warning signs they should pay attention to? Not in a panic way, but in just a healthy awareness way.
I think if just an athlete is looking a little deflated, maybe they're distracted from their schoolwork or they're not participating in their social life as they normally do, or, they're not as excited to go to practice, to go to competitions. Those are just all signs of that I'm a little deflated and I need to reset.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's assume there is a wrestler. This wrestler is burnout, and you seen this as a coach. So, what would your recommendation be?
Well, from a coaching perspective, if you're worried about a kid, it's just about starting a conversation and asking them questions that aren't necessarily about wrestling, but asking them how things are with school, how things are at home, right? And then, the conversation may lead to wrestling and you see where there might be connections of hardship and maybe signs that they need a break or they need support in a certain area.
And for parents, and I might be one of them, I want the best for my kid. I feel like my kid needs to keep going. What do you feel, me as a parent, what do you feel I should tell my kid if I am seeing the warning signs? Maybe my coach said, look, I think your kid is burned out. What do you feel, me or another parent should do?
I think it's just important to listen to your children. And if you need to have a dialogue about wrestling, you got to make sure they understand you're coming from a place of compassion and support and that you want to help them. And that it's not so much that I'm trying to figure out if you're burned out because I want you on the mat, but I want to know that you're burned out so I can support you and help you in this situation.
Mm-hmm. Is it okay to stop for a little bit and maybe do something
Absolutely.
else? Okay. What do you feel like would be good? Okay, you know what? I think you need to take a break. I think you should do what?
I mean, if you're serious about being a high school wrestler, like you want to perhaps be like a starter on your team, be a state qualifier, you got to stay in shape. So you're lifting, you're running, your diet's got to be right, your sleep's got to be right. But that also means if you're interested in playing a spring sport, go do that. Because if you're able to engage in a positive team environment and still engage in competition in a healthy way, you're going to be excited about getting back to wrestling because you're just an athlete and you're doing what athletes are supposed to do, which is take care of themselves and have fun.
Awesome. Now, which spring sports do you feel complement wrestling?
You know, it's tough. I like to say there's nothing like wrestling, but I've got a couple athletes who I know are playing water polo. And water polo is, I mean, I love wrestling, but water polo might be too difficult for me. A lot of swimming. It's a physical sport, it's a competitive sport, and it kind of calls on the body to work in a similar way that it does in wrestling, where you're using all your faculties.
That's awesome. That's honestly the first time I hear it. But my daughter, she's taking a lift and conditioning class. And
Yeah.
this last week, they had a couple sessions where they got in the water. She actually started her high school career as a competitive swimmer, and then she quit it
Mhm.
to become a wrestler. And
Yeah.
but she was a butterfly in her team. She's a senior now, so she decided to see if she still got it. So she decided to swim butterfly. Next thing you know, the boys coach came to her and he's like, "We could really use you on the girls water polo team."
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
maybe not, but okay.
Yeah, it's a tough sport. You know, and also track and field is another great option because just learning from coaches who are going to teach you running and jumping mechanics, it's going to make you a better athlete and it'll make you more effective in wrestling.
Okay, let's talk about track. There is so many different options in track. So what do you
Right.
feel in track would complement wrestling?
I think everything, really. I mean, if you look at sprinting, right, it's going to work on your running mechanics, making your legs stronger. If you participate in any of the jumping events, broad jump, triple jump, high jump, that all just is asking you to be a higher athlete. And then even like shot put, right, it implements throwing mechanics, which like backstepping and whatnot that you see in judo or you might also see in wrestling.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, well, let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about what a smart off season can include. And let's start, but let's try to keep it practical. When you think in a smart off season, what do you feel like? What kind of things can be a part of the smart off season?
You want to be in a room where you're comfortable and you're being pushed to limits that you can handle, right? There's definitely rooms that can be more competitive, and for athletes that are maybe more competitive at like a national or even international wrestler and or international level, excuse me. And that's just not every kid, right? So you want to make sure you're with a group of wrestlers that can challenge you and that you can learn there, and you have coaches that you trust and you feel safe with.
I'm assuming not all girls on the same level. At which point of time do you decide, you know what, I think you should explore other options where the wrestling room is more competitive?
Yeah, that's just in the event that a wrestler doesn't have access to a partner or even a coach that can really push them. You know, I think that doesn't happen very often, but if it does, it's just another conversation you got to have with the athlete. What are they comfortable with? Are there changes they're interested in making? And just again, keeping their best interest in mind always.
Some of the things that usually we can do during the off season are open mats, lift, drilling, camps, recovery, mobility, and maybe doing other sports. What do you feel the things that will benefit the most to an athlete?
What I'm focused on right now is a lot of lifting and just improving athletic mechanics and neutral mechanics, because a lot of that also plays into injury prevention. If I'm training my body, I'm training my joints, I'm making myself more compatible for the sport of wrestling, which can be dangerous at times.
There's so many things that you can do. Let's say you train 4 days a week, and part
Mhm.
of it will probably be lifting and drilling. But do you feel like we need additional time more than 4 days a week?
If an athlete can train 6 days a week and recover properly and not get burned out, there's no reason that I would suggest they don't do that.
Okay. And what are you thinking about? Like, what are your thoughts about camps?
Camps are a great way to get exposed to other wrestlers from around the country, right? Getting a new look. And also, what I love that coaches are doing with camps now is it's just not another high school coach in this camp, but they're getting clinicians that are, Olympic level athletes, world team members, successful female and male collegiate athletes to come and teach these kids the things that have made them successful. And it also is an opportunity for kids to connect with someone who was once like them, just a kid in a wrestling room trying to get better.
Uh-huh. Do you think every wrestler needs a freestyle and Greco in the off season?
I think it's good to be exposed to them, but because of how much they emphasize scoring from neutral, but also when it comes to things like guts and laces and defending them, and then the hand fighting element of Greco, I think it helps kids develop better body awareness, right? And how to control their hips and their weight, which is so important in wrestling.
When we are talking about the Greco, it's not very common with the girls as the freestyle.
Right,
And
right.
especially since we know the girls that are looking to wrestle in college, they will be doing freestyle. So, what
Mhm.
are some of the reasons you think the girls should do Greco?
Well, Greco is going to really teach you how to focus on hand fighting. Because if you want to score on a good athlete, you're going to need to create angles, you're going to need to move them. And that stems from the hand fight. And then, I mean, and then a little piece is like, yeah, you can learn some big moves in Greco and you can apply those in freestyle. I mean, that's not the majority of where the scoring's going to be in super competitive matches, but it's fun and something to maybe keep in your back pocket when you need 4 or 5 points.
Going back into the season in November, that will still benefit any wrestler who has drastically improved their hand fighting skill.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just don't try suplexing people in folk style.
Yes.
Okay, how about strength training? You mentioned it a few times before. So, what role should the strength training play, especially for the girls who want to be stronger but may
Mhm.
feel intimidated by the weight room and don't
Mhm.
quite know where to start?
I think it's a matter of having the right coach behind you and then also having a group of girls, right? Because if I'm the only female athlete in this weight room and it's filled with, football players and track athletes, yeah, I'm going to feel isolated and not as excited about the training. But if I'm with a group of my peers and my teammates and we're all in there with the same goal of getting better and making our bodies more prepared for the sport, that's more exciting. It's more fun.
Mhm. Where do you feel the technique fits in this off season? Because sometimes it feels like wrestlers assume that the improvement means more live matches. So, what do you feel the biggest gain would be from targeted drilling and position specific work?
I mean, when you're practicing technique, I mean, if you take something like a high crotch, for example, like there's always details you can learn and relearn and emphasize, because if a new athlete comes in and they're trying to learn as many moves as possible, they're gonna not really get better at anything. If I come into the off season knowing I want to work on a handful of moves and I maintain and I'm consistent in practicing that handful, that is where you'll see real growth.
Okay, perfect. So, let's say we want to practice maybe a couple specific off season goals.
Mhm.
Can we have some examples? Let's say for a wrestler who just completed their first season.
I think you want to separate like technical goals and then like personal goals. A technical goal being like, I scored 3 takedowns in one of my matches, whereas the personal goal being, I wrestled and I was willing to compete in 3 developmentals, right? Taking that chance, going out there and competing.
Okay. And I think it would definitely help for an athlete to put that down on paper. And I think,
100%.
yes, and I totally say those are my personal. So how many goals do you feel like enough for the off season? Personal goals and technical goals.
I think it's subjective to the athlete. If they think they could have 5 of each, 10 of each, and they're comfortable with that number and they can work in the direction to achieve that, then they should do that. But if an athlete's more comfortable with the lower number, 2 or 3 things, and they feel that they can achieve that, then that should be their number.
Hmm. How many competitions do you think is enough to improve without overloading?
I know for our spring season, we're expecting kids to wrestle in 4 developmentals and then freestyle state.
And when you are talking to somebody and they are not quite sure if they're ready to go to our competition, when do you decide that they are better off spending more time on in practices versus if they should go and compete?
Well, I'm glad that's a good question because that's something I've been thinking a lot about this off season is because I have athletes that I have great technical skills and they display them in the room very well. But sometimes we go out and wrestle and we're not able to apply them. And I think it's because in the past we haven't maybe competed enough because that's the opportunity where you're just able to test yourself. It's not so much about am I going to go win or lose these matches, but am I willing to take what I work so hard on and take a chance on it succeeding in a match?
Mhm. I just recently had a conversation with my son who said, "Why don't you want me to go and compete?" And my answer to him was, "Well, if you're going to go to the competition, you will probably wrestle for 15 minutes. Versus if you instead go to practice, which is at the same time, you will put, a good an hour and a half to 2 hours of real wrestling, like drilling and doing all this stuff." So I do feel like it probably does depend on the goals. Do you have enough skills to go and compete and maybe win? Or should you put more time into practice? Am I wrong?
Mhm. No, I mean, that's a great way to think about it because practice is an opportunity to be pushed physically and learn wrestling. And then competition is where we're able to test ourselves and what we've gained from our training. So if we haven't been training enough, then maybe it's not time to go step on the mat against a kid who's very serious about wrestling. But if I've been training for, 4 or 5 months, I think going to take that chance is definitely worth it because that is where you really where you really learn and see how applicable your technique is.
And there is also something to say about girls competitions versus boy competitions.
Hmm.
We all want girls wrestling to grow,
Right.
and especially in the off season, you definitely see the drastic difference in the levels.
Hmm.
Where a girl who is a first year wrestler can go into developmental and do relatively well versus a boy who has been wrestling for several years not do as well.
Hmm.
Okay, let's circle back to the camps. What makes camp truly worth it? And what should families consider before signing up?
I mean, it's all relative to really financial means. I think like local clinics are typically the easiest. If you can drive there, it's like a half hour, hour away. Couple days for like 100 something bucks. They have good, collegiate clinicians. I think that's the easiest option for most families because then when you start looking at camps at like Division 1 schools or maybe at more expensive clubs, you might be exceeding your means.
Hmm. Do you have any favorite camp?
Last year and this upcoming summer, our team went to, and this was for girls only, Indiana Tech in Fort Wayne.
Hmm.
It's an NAIA school. They had 48 girls on the wrestling team this season, and that camp is run by their head coach, Paul Rademacher. and he's got a lot of the girls from the team there helping out. And what I love about it, it's a very fair price, and it's a lot of good technique. And it's a nice small school in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Awesome. For athletes who cannot afford lots of camps and travel, what is the best low cost off season approach?
I think talking to your coach about that is important. A lot of good programs, they're able to have a booster club or other forms of financial assistance for their kids to try and help do the things that they want to do.
Okay. Now we have established that different ages, different levels will have a different season, and we have concentrated a lot on newer wrestlers. For a
Mm.
wrestler who is chasing a state level goal, what do you feel their off season priorities should be?
Just continue to be consistent in what you are already doing that makes you successful, and try and go and find a match that you're going to lose. If you're, in the top 1% and it's hard for you to be challenged and you want to be like a state champion, you got to go find those challenges because it's going to show you things you can keep working on. Because once you get at a very high level, it can become difficult to recognize growth. And so it's important to just notice the little things that you are improving on, and then going out there and wrestling other really good kids at a national tournament as a way to really be tested and find things that you can focus in on that will continue to help you elevate what is already a very high skill level.
Awesome. Now let's talk a little bit about mental side of things. How do you help an athlete to stay motivated without turning wrestling into a chore?
We just try and tell our kids wrestling is about learning. It's a special sport and it tests the body and the mind in a way that most don't. Getting to be in a wrestling room is a unique opportunity, and it's going to be an experience you won't get a lot in life. So just giving yourself credit for being tested, for trying to get better, and just keep focusing on learning.
Hmm. Okay. What do you tell a wrestler who feels guilty about taking a day or a week off?
That they're still doing the right thing.
Okay. Any advice for a wrestler who might have not had a great season or who is just ended the season with a tough loss?
It's normal to be disappointed in your performance, and you deserve to be able to feel that. But once you're able to come to terms with the emotional side of a disappointing end to a season or a disappointing season, it's just you got to be objective and go back and look at the things you can improve on. Because if you really love the sport and you love learning and you go back and you identify those things that you can fix, that should be exciting, right? And that's a way to kind of propel and move forward from a moment of disappointment.
Good words. Now let's talk a little bit about parents' role in all of this. What do you feel parents should focus on in the off season to best support their wrestlers?
They should just be supporting what their athlete wants to do. Because especially in like something like wrestling, and this happens in all sorts of sports, parents can mistakenly impose their intentions and wishes for their kids onto them. And sometimes that's not what the kid wants. So it's a matter of just having good communication, listening to your athlete, and supporting them in what they want to do.
Okay. What are some of the good questions that parents can ask their athlete to encourage a healthy balance and healthy goals?
I think it's just like it should be a little more general, like, what do you want to do this summer? And then little conversations like, how was practice yesterday? Just getting them to speak and listening to how they're experiencing their off season, or if there's anything they're interested in doing in the summer or the fall, and extracting what they want and then acting in a supporting role.
Okay. If you have a family, or maybe you heard of a family that's putting more pressure on a kid than I feel is needed, they feel that their kid needs to do more. How would you handle families like that?
It's just you gotta have a conversation with the parent that comes from a place of concern and love and support for the kid, because it's not fair for us as coaches to go up to a parent and immediately criticize them, because they're the parents, their child. But we have to make sure if we have those conversations that we're coming from a place of support and that we want to help the kid, we want to help the parents, right? We want to help our program be the best that they can be or the program can be.
Okay. Okay, I have a few fun questions. What is one off-season myth you wish would go away?
Kids just shouldn't think that because they show up and they do all the things that their coach told them to do, that they're going to win,
Okay.
right? There's got to be a level of intentionality when you go to practice, that you're really focused on getting better and learning, and that there's more things you can do than what your coach tells you to do. There's always other opportunities for you to grow as a wrestler, as an individual, that may apply when you compete.
Okay, so think for yourself. Got it. One habit that creates the biggest improvement by the next season.
Consistency in any sort of activity, whether it's drilling a move, whether it's doing extra push-ups, extra sprints after practice, going to your lifts, going to PT. As long as you're doing one or two things consistently, you're going to see growth there.
Okay, follow-up question. Consistency or intensity, what matters more?
Consistency, 100%.
Okay. Best advice to a wrestler who wants to level up and still continue to love the sport.
Find a group of people, like some teammates, to share that growth with. That's what's going to make it fun. That's what's going to make it exciting. And when you and some teammates are able to grow and experience success together, that is like the best part of sport.
Okay, awesome. Now, we usually do this in the beginning of the episode, but let's learn a little bit about you and your team. I was behind you at the state competition watching you girls wrestle. I saw you coach them on the mat in the biggest arena of the state for the girls, but somebody who wasn't there. How about you share a little bit about your experience in wrestling, where you're coming from, and where your team is right now?
Yeah. So I started wrestling when I was 7. My cousin was wrestling at New Trier High School. My dad took me to watch him, and then we kind of decided that this is what I was going to do. So I grew up wrestling. I wrestled at New Trier, and then one of the assistant coaches at New Trier, he became the boys head coach at Lane. And so when I was older, he asked me to come help him out, and it's stuck ever since. And so now I'm the girls head wrestling coach at Lane Tech, and I coach with Matt Yan. He's the boys head coach.
Okay. So how big is your team?
We ended the season with 27 girls.
Okay, that's a lot. And
Yes.
What season is this for you? Like for the girls?
We're going to be going into my 6th season.
Whoa. Okay. Awesome. So how did your girls do this season?
We won our conference. We won the city tournament, which was like 30 something teams. Got second at the regional, and we won the sectional with 4 state qualifiers, and we had 1 state medalist.
Awesome. Okay. So how do you feel the girls state compares to boys state?
I've never been to the boys state tournament, if I'm being honest.
Uh-huh.
But I know it's a lot bigger,
Mhm.
and that's all I can say. It's bigger. It's been going on longer, but I think the growth we're seeing with the girls tournament is super exciting.
Where do you hope to see girls wrestling in, let's say, 5 years?
I just like to see the numbers growing and seeing the sport positively impact lives, because wrestling's unique, and I think it's great for character building, and also can be a great team sport. Even though when we watch wrestling, it's an individual versus an individual, but it's exciting to see that with another sport in the IHSA, that schools can work to create programs that support people.
Okay. Do you hope that the state gets bigger?
It's a great sport, and the more people participate in it, the better.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. I am looking forward to see how Lane Tech does next year, and I'm sure we'll be seeing you at Freestyle State and beyond.
Thank you very much.
The off-season is not about proving how much you can suffer. It's about building the next version of yourself, skill by skill, habit by habit, without losing your love for the sport. You do not have to do everything. You do not have to copy everybody else. And more is not always better. The goal is to show up next season stronger, sharper, healthier, and still excited to wrestle. Thank you for joining us on the Illinois Girls Wrestling Podcast. Wrestling is more than wins and losses. It's about growth, resilience, discipline, and the community. And whether your athlete is brand new to the sport or chasing a big goal, we hope this episode helped you feel a little bit more informed, supported, and encouraged. If this episode helped you, please share it with a wrestling parent, coach, or athlete who could use it. We are on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. If you have any questions or ideas for new topics, email us at ilgirlswrestling@gmail.com. And until next time, keep showing up, keep learning, and keep building this incredible girls wrestling community we have here in Illinois. Bye.